Okay, everybody, Croeso nôl, welcome back. Time and again, young teachers tell us that they love the job that they do and that helping children and young people is incredibly rewarding, and I totally agree with that. However, teacher burnout is a very real concern, and juggling the demands of the job with additional caring responsibilities can be overwhelming at times. I know that from personal experience. So welcome, Sinead. You're going to discuss how teachers can look after their own well-being and to ensure that they remain in the teaching profession, because it is a fantastic profession to be in. So welcome to you, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks a million, Angela, and lovely to be with you. I've raced in straight from my primary school winter fair. We were one of the lucky ones that got to go ahead, and it's fascinating, isn't it? It's the first time the school community, I mean, people may have responses in terms of what they feel about bringing people together in this way, but it's the first time parents have been in the school for almost 2 years, probably since the 2019 winter fair. And it's really interesting to see how excited they are to be around and to connect. And I think it's one of the things of this time, you know, it's not a big urgent thing. It's not something that we all notice and needs to make a newspaper headline. But when our communities are further away from school, I think we feel it in the day-to-day of how the interactions are. So I hope for those of you who are in the early part of your career that you get the opportunity before too long to be around in an environment where your families are feeling that more physical connection to the school, because I think it improves everybody's spirit and regard for the school. But anyway, that's a tangent, and I'm here to talk to you about well-being and just work-life balance. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I've got a few slides. If there's things on the slides, and there are some phone numbers and website links, I'm going to send them through to colleagues at the NASUWT to circulate to you as a PDF. So don't feel like you need to take notes if there's anything you're particularly interested in following up. I'll also say, if you've tuned into this session thinking, great, I can finally get the question answered that I always wanted answered about how do I really care for my well-being when I work in this sort of circumstance, please raise the question. I'd be delighted to engage in a conversation with you, or to chat about the issues that you raise. So don't feel that you're not getting that issue addressed if there's something on your mind. So I'll tell you quickly about the charity education support. We have been around for 144 years, and we were founded in the trade union movement by teachers for teachers. And we still work today in many of the ways that we did in 1877. It's just that the technology has changed and the channels that we speak to people have moved on. But we work at 3 levels of the education system. We provide direct support to individuals through a free helpline. And through that helpline, you can access counseling 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And you might not be sitting there thinking, do you know what I need now is I need to be able to access a counselor. That's not usually how people come to us. Normally, people find themselves trying to deal with something and it's too difficult. They can't seem to work out what it is the right way forward, or that doesn't feel right to them. And they may not want to talk to other people in their lives because many of us think, well, everybody's living in this pandemic situation. Everybody's got it tough. I don't want to put that on anyone else around me. And so I think I would just say to you that this helpline is for a conversation. You don't need to be in crisis. But we have trained people on the other end of the phone. And the great thing about trained people is they know how to have a good conversation. It's not that you would be phoning them up to get an answer. It's that sometimes in hearing ourselves talk, we actually make sense of what it is that's going on and what's most important. So that number is available to anyone working in any role across any site in education. And that includes all of you. So that's one of the main things we do. It's a free service. It's a confidential service. We also provide financial support for people in distress. If you've been working for more than a year in the sector and you are in distress, then you can get financial support through us, and the links to it are on the website. People end up in difficult circumstances for all sorts of reasons. And so we can sometimes help when that happens to people. And then finally, we have a lot of resources for individuals on our website. There's a whole bunch of stuff, whether you want to learn more about anxiety or depression or bullying in the workplace, or how to set boundaries effectively, we've got resources for you on there. And there's also resources for schools and colleges, but there's a whole section on stuff for individuals. So that's worth checking out if you're interested in this work. And then, so that's what we do for individuals. We also work with schools as workplaces. And we help them try to improve how as a workplace they care for the people, who are working for them. And we do that through a few things. We provide employee assistance programs that we work really hard to make sure are excellent. And those give you direct access to counselling as well through your school, but also to a wider range of services, including kind of coaching or work-life stuff. If you've got a grandparent or a parent who needs special care, but you don't know what the provision is in the area of the country they live in, then colleagues through this service can help you. So it's that kind of thing. We provide facilitated peer support, and we also increasingly are moving into the world of providing supervision, which isn't the same as line management, but supervision, professional supervision, is a forum in which either in a one-to-one situation or in a group situation, you can discuss the things that are core to your role, about how it is that you retain your focus on doing what it is you want to do for the children and young people you're working with, how you look after yourself in that, maybe unpicking a little bit the impact of the role, because, you know, for many of us, our day jobs do have an impact on us, and having a safe space to discuss and unpack that and learn a little bit, and then figure out how to apply that learning to make life a little bit easier when you go back. That's the sort of thing that we do. And then the last thing we do is research the health of the workforce and use those findings to inform the work that we do talking to government when we want government. You know, your colleagues here in the union make a great case to government for different changes that should happen. And we try and take a very specific focus on well-being and mental health, and to speak to government on that agenda, because it's our belief that when people are well, they will teach at their best. And that has to be good for everybody in the system. So that's what we do as an organization. So let me tell you some of the things that we've learned through all of this research that we've done. What is it that keeps you going? And by you, I mean teachers generally, because teachers are different from other professional or occupational groups. And the things that are most important to keep our teachers going are collegiality, good positive relationships with colleagues across a school is really important for keeping our teachers well. And so if you're isolated, or if you're in a school where the relationships are not positive, or if you're in a department where the relationships are not positive, the downside is that can have a big negative effect. But if we can get to a place where those colleague relationships are positive, that is disproportionately good for teachers in keeping them well. The second thing that's really important is appreciation. And this isn't rocket science. This is true for everybody. If we are appreciated, we have greater sense of satisfaction in the job that we do. And that greater sense of satisfaction is directly correlated to our personal well-being. So getting the appreciation right is really, really important. And if you're in a school where you're not readily being offered appreciation, and that's true for many of us. Many of us work in environments where, you know, it isn't quick or easy to come by appreciation. One of the things you can do is think about, what are the questions I can ask that might elicit some feedback, and hopefully some of that feedback will be positive, and try and put yourself in a place where you can nearly force that feedback, because there will be good stuff in there. And particularly if you ask the question for what you're doing well, you can take that away, and that can be a real source of confidence and satisfaction in life, which directly affects your well-being. And the last thing is purpose. Purpose is the most important thing that affects anybody's job satisfaction. And I know for many, teaching is far more than a job, but at one level it is a job. And making sure that it is a satisfying one is really important to ensuring that your well-being is in the place you want it to be, and that you're not more bedraggled than you would want. Having a clear sense of purpose is correlated with better well-being in a work environment, but also getting back in touch with that sense of purpose. So if you went into teaching to make a difference to young people's lives, finding ways to make sure that you are able to understand what's happening in the lives of the young people that you support after, that you teach after they've left you, finding the ways to get roots to those stories, and have, again, some insight into the impact that you're having through the work that you do in the classroom is really important. There's lots of evidence that teachers make a phenomenal impact. So you can read data about it, but somehow data doesn't speak to us in quite the same way. And if you have the opportunity to keep up or find ways through the school community or through the wider community to hear about how young people are doing after they've passed through your classroom, that can also be a really important thing to do. So those are things that are really important to teachers specifically, as opposed to other occupational groups. We have loads of research on the health and well-being of teachers. I'm not going to go through it now, but if you're interested, there's loads of stuff on our website. But the really big findings from our most recent piece of research are stress is very high in the profession. There are barriers to people reaching out for help. So there's still some stigma to saying, this is really far too stressful, this is not reasonable, or I have a mental health issue actually, and I need to make some adjustments to how I'm working, or I need some particular support. People are not confident to do that. And we have a long way to go in the profession to get to a place where that is just a very normal thing. It's been very positive in pandemic that mental health has been at the top of the list of what everybody's thought about, because we've all been very intimately reminded of our own mental health. I don't think anybody's come through this pandemic thinking that's the best way I've ever spent nearly 2 years. And that's a positive thing, because it reminds everyone that everyone has mental health, and mental health goes up and down and it fluctuates. It's not that some people have poor mental health and others never do. It's far more nuanced than that. So we have work to do here. The other thing is presenteeism is particularly high in education compared to other professions. And this is an issue. So one of the things for you as teachers in the early part of your career is to not go to work when you're not well. I mean, that's kind of the long and the short of it. If you go to work when you're not well, you don't perform as well, and it takes you longer to recover. And there is so much evidence, it's extraordinary amounts of evidence to tell us that is really not smart. It is far better for you to take the time you need to get well and then go back to work and do a good job, because you're fully back up on your feet again. So those are some things I would draw to your attention. What's underneath all of this? Well, it's driven predominantly by workload, even though that's improving. According to our own research, how people experience workload is improving. Accountability is a driver for it, as is trust, that sense of government having trust in us as a profession, or just for you, maybe more at this point in your career, feeling the extent of trust that the colleagues around you have in you. If you're in a good space, in a good school, and a good fit for you, you probably are feeling trusted. But if you're in a school that is not such a good fit for you, you may not be. And that can be correlated to poor well-being and mental health. Line management is really important in any work, including in a school. And the relationship between your manager and yourself is the most, after purpose, is the most significant impact on your well-being and mental health from a work perspective. So that relationship is really, really important. And if you reflect and think, that's going well, then that may well be a source of real strength and positivity for you. If it's going badly, not so much. And then there are some things to think about in terms of how can we raise that question with the people who are line managing us? How can we have a conversation about how we improve that relationship? Is that possible, or is there anybody else in the school system we can talk with about how we might be able to improve that relationship? School culture is really important. All schools are different. I think this is really important when you're at the beginning of your career. You might think you don't like teaching. It might just be you don't like the school you're in. And so it's really important to try and disaggregate those things. But those are some of the big drivers for stress in the sector. And in terms of thinking about well-being, I talk about it in this way, that I think well-being for anyone is at the point where three different things interact. One is what's going on for me personally in my life, and that's really at the forefront. If I'm having a difficult time personally, I'm going to struggle because that will affect my work life. That's just how it works. And again, there's good research on this. So that's the biggest factor. The next factor is the workplace and how well it suits me. Is it a place I feel respected and cared for in? Have I got good colleague relationships? Am I trusted? Do I have some autonomy and support? Or is it a place where I feel actually quite bashed and it's a struggle, and I don't feel well treated, I don't feel well regarded, I don't feel supported? That's clearly going to heap additional pressure on people. But there's also a more remote layer again, which is still relevant, even though it's remote, and that's the policy environment. And I think that's what we see in conversations about the accountability regime. So whether we should, I mean, accountability probably needs to exist in the system, but how accountability exists is really up for conversation. And whether we need league tables, for example, which seem to be fairly counterproductive to the well-being of teachers is another factor. But I won't get into that here, but just to say, it's the interaction between what's happening for me personally, what my workplace is like, and how the wider education sector is held that is going to influence how well or not I am. So if you take nothing else away, take this away. This is incredibly difficult, and I know you're early career teachers, so you've just spent a lot of time learning and learning and learning. So you're probably the most super smart people in the world, but even you may struggle with this very complicated theory. But let me give it a lash anyway. I've done lots of reading and read lots of research, been knee deep in our own data on this, and I've really come to think that what's most important around the well-being of teachers is reducing the stressors on an individual. So anything that is causing a stress, let's try and dampen that down and increase the things that give people resilience, and we call that protective resilience. So the stuff that we do that's good for us, that energizes us, creates what we call protective resilience. It makes us better able to deal with the other stuff that's more difficult. And really, that's the long and the short of looking after your well-being and your work-life balance. Reduce the stuff that's problematic and increase the stuff that makes you feel good. And if you can attend to that, then you will put yourself in significantly better space. What you do in terms of what's good for you will be very different from what's good for me. So there's no magic bullet. I love playing the guitar and singing miserable Irish songs. I'm probably on my own in this room in terms of how that makes you feel better or worse. That may be a stressor for many of you. So it's very, very personal. But attending to minimizing the sources of stress and maximizing the things that make you feel better, that is how we achieve balance. And that really, for me, is the long and the short of what all of this is about. And just a couple of examples of that. If we think about policy, so we talked about the policy environment, well, we can see that the accountability sort of a system is very high stakes, and that's driving stress. So how could we reconfigure accountability to reduce stress would be the question we'd ask there. The same with professional identity. Teachers don't always feel well respected by particularly the media and government. So if we could reduce some of the strain of that, in fact, if we could flip it around and build a way of somehow the profession being held in the status it deserves, it would be a source of protective resilience. It would be good for the profession. And the same with appreciation. If we can increase appreciation, then we're increasing the protective resilience, and that's a good thing. And at a workplace level, culture and leadership, if you work in a school with a really positive culture with great leaders, that is boosting your resilience right there. If you're in a school where the leadership is more old school, more top down, less inclusive, less open, feels more punitive, and you're being told exactly how to do everything and when to do it, then that's probably a source of stress. Collegiality, again, can be a great source of protective resilience, good professional development when that allows you to get into the stuff that you find purposeful in education, boosts resilience. And reflective practice, something that we talk a lot about in teaching, but we don't necessarily have time to do well. Pardon me. I could never have been a teacher because I lose my voice too easily, having shouted on the winter fair stall this morning. My voice is going to give out now. Anyway, we have there's a link at the end to a free reflective practice, paired, working in pairs to reflect together, e-learning that we produced, funded by Welsh Government, but is accessible to anyone. And if you're interested in reflective practice and don't have the capacity to do it elsewhere, that's a great place to start. And the last one is skills and knowledge about how to look after ourselves. So all that stuff of well-being. And again, you can find great stuff on our website that can help you with some of this stuff. At the level of individual, The line management relationship, I talked about this already, can be a great source of stress, but if we can work on that and find a way to shift it, it can also be a fantastic source of resilience. The same with that sense of autonomy, that I have some choice about what I do and how I do it reasonably. Obviously, at the beginning of your career, you need a lot of scaffolding to help build your professional capacity, but you also want some space to grow your own approach. And then workload, which we know is incredibly important in terms of volume, but it's not just about volume. It's also about intensity and the type of work, and finding good work is really, really important. So if you're stuck in school doing work that doesn't feel like good work, it's very bureaucratic, if it's not core to the learning of children, that will be a drain on you. And it's a really good thing to raise as a conversation if you can. And I realize you can't always. And the last one there is the emotional content of the role. Teachers increasingly are dealing with very difficult social issues, emotional issues, mental health issues in the classroom. And sometimes that can also take us into family lives and very difficult circumstances that can leave you carrying a lot. So it's really important, if you're in this situation, that you get appropriate support. And again, if there's nothing in the school, please use our helpline if you're left with a situation that leaves you feeling uneasy or waking up or your mind going back to it. Right, missed my slides there, but there you go. I want you to just read this in your own time when you get the slide deck, but these are symptoms that are associated with poor mental health. Any one of us probably has had one or two of them in this week, doubtless. But if you're having patterns of clusters of these symptoms routinely, then it may be that that's a way of your body telling you you're under a lot of stress. And you may not recognize it, and you may think you're managing fine and you have your head down. But if you start to find clusters of these symptoms, it really is time to have a chat with someone and maybe get a little bit of help. If we don't address these warning signs, stress and burnout can become something we can't turn back. At the point where somebody's burnt out, you can't fix it easily. Burnout takes a long time to recover from. It's, at a point of being so emotionally drained that actually it's going to take many months to recover properly from it. Whereas if we can catch the symptoms and signs of stress early before they become that hardened, we can do a much better job of recovering well and getting ourselves back to a place of being well. So think about that. And if you notice these clusters of symptoms in yourself or in colleagues or in other people in your lives, it's really worth having a conversation and not just ignoring it. Some basic things to do to look after yourself regularly. Recognizing, particularly in pandemic, in this situation where we don't know what is or isn't coming, that ambiguity can create a lot of difficulty for people and emotions and responses. And I think it's just important to recognize and acknowledge that whatever your response is fine. It's obviously not fine whatever you do with it, but the response itself is normal. So you don't need to feel weird or bad for having it. Get lots of exercise, eat well, avoid too much sugar and booze, difficult at this time of year. Try and make sure that you've got good sleep habits. Don't have the phone in the room. Don't be going straight from the computer to bed. Find different ways to wind down. Be attentive to what sort of social media you're using. Practice gratitude. Notice the things you have to be happy and grateful for in life, because moving our attention in that way, there's lots of research again that tells us it's a great thing to do, and it can keep us well. Find ways to be creative. I mean, you're in the early part of your teaching career, so that in itself is a creative endeavor, but try and do something outside of work and get into nature a little bit. And don't be afraid to talk about your feelings. It's a smart thing to do. And as for all that uncertainty of what might happen, what might not, we can't control it. So the best thing you can do is accept it and move on and put your attention somewhere else to something you can affect. So some things to just remind you of. As a trainee, the institution you're in, the school you're in, is a variable. It doesn't mean you don't like teaching just because you don't like the school you're in. So try and remember that. Don't be a sponge. Don't suck up everything around you. You have to draw a boundary, decide what you can do, and don't take on any more than that, because you could work literally around the clock and you still wouldn't be done with all the things you could be doing. So you have to decide a sensible place to pause. Make yourself a resource map, the stuff that really helps you to get through. And make it when you've got a quiet moment, and good people to talk to, people who energize you, groups to connect with, material to read, stuff to do, the singing miserable ballads with your guitar, whatever your equivalent of that is. Put all this stuff down in one kind of mind map. And then you can go to that when you're not feeling great. You don't have to be thinking creatively in that moment. You can just look at your resource map and decide what to do. Good habits, talked about these more or less through. Self-efficacy is about you feeling that you make a difference. And this is really important to all of us. It's linked to the sense of purpose. And again, if you can get some feedback that tells you you're doing a good job, you're making a difference in some way, that boosts your sense of self. It's very important for our well-being. There's links to resources in there. That number is free all the time to any of you. If you've nobody else to talk to, use it. If you've got other people to talk to, but you don't want to, use it. It's there for you to help you. Angela, I will stop there. I'm sure I've said more than enough at that point.
Well, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. One of the things I want to ask, and I keep asking this because I'm living in rural Wales, is this open to everyone within the UK, or is this just an England-based service?
Everyone in the UK, Angela. And if you want to drop me a line, we also have some specialist services in Wales. I've got a wellbeing advisor on the ground who'll go into Welsh schools to help. So everyone's eligible to use that helpline.
We absolutely will be dropping you a line to bring that back into Wales, and I assume colleagues in the other devolved nations will be doing that as well. You everything you said there just encapsulates, and presented so eloquently exactly what is the fact that so many teachers sadly leave the profession because they've become overwhelmed by everything that is going on. It is the best profession to be in. I would say that. I've been teaching over 37 years, but there are some real dangers as well that we have to steer around carefully, with regards to our mental health and our physical health. You mentioned there about your voice, and we do for our NQT seminars, we do some voice training, and we have a voice coach that helps us to physically prepare and to keep ourselves well in that respect as well, because this is our main instrument of teaching. Even though we did just learn about online teaching, it still is a lot of this is our main instrument, so we have to look after it. I really thank you. I am sorry there isn't enough time to give you the questions that are coming in, but we will send them on to you, and we will advocate your service, absolutely. And I hope this is the first of many times that I get to see you and hear you, and hopefully one day actually see you in the real room rather than in the virtual space. Let's hope you can make that. So you enjoy the rest of your Saturday with your family. And to everybody now, we've got to quickly leave this webinar and join our final one, where we'll be talking about safety online, which again is something that we need to bear in mind. Thank you very much, John Ed. That was absolutely fantastic. And see you all in a few minutes on the next webinar. Cheers.
Take care, everyone. Have a good one. Thanks a million.
Bye.